here with another receivables webinar here today with Jody Bedoya, here to talk to us about training up middle managers. And for those of us that are having trouble hiring these days, which is pretty much everybody, as we're having trouble hiring, we tend to promote from within. And when we promote from within, if we're not giving the right tools to the right people to help grow our middle management, well, then we are just setting ourselves up for success. And Jody, I know that this is a world that you live in. So could you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Yeah, hi. Well, my seat is in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm sitting here at 4 a.m. with my cup of coffee. Thanks, Adam.
It's a good
um,
way to start.
yeah, yeah. And talking about collections and leaders at, 4 o'clock in the morning. Fantastic. My background, I started at Toyota Finance, and my boss one day said to me, "You'd be a great team leader." I said, "Doing what?" He said, "Repossessions." So, okay, I can do that. So I started in the repossession space and moved through debt collection agencies and debt purchase companies. And I think, Adam, just out of pure frustration of really, I couldn't find any training, I
Mhm.
thought I'm going to start up a training company focusing on not just collections, but all things communication, which leads us to today, which is also how team leaders support the front line.
And you've got so many interesting stories as you and I started talking our way through what it is that you were doing for the middle managers. And I honestly didn't even realize kind of how simple some of these things are. But let's start with. I want to try and explain to our audience, really where you're coming from here with the statement that like if we're not training these middle managers, that we're setting ourselves up for total failure here. So I
Mm.
want to kind of like set a stage here for a quick scenario and then like let you kind of walk us through this a little bit. But your best collector gets promoted. She's motivated, capable, and completely unsupported. In a month, she's overwhelmed, her team is struggling, and she's back to doing collections herself. And one of the first things that a new manager does when they get control or they're now responsible for these other people is to pick it up and do it themselves. And I've been guilty of this. I'm sure pretty much anybody watching this has been guilty of it at one point or another in their career. But like, how do you address that type of a scenario? How do you address the fact that when you moved this really high performer into another role that you think they're going to be really good at? Because when they're a really good collector, they're probably also training the people around them. But like,
Yeah.
how do you reverse that downward trend and provide these people with the tools they need to be successful?
Yeah, it's a tricky question, right? And I think what happens is we come in at the front line and we look at the team leaders, but we start the level layer above, right? We look
Mhm.
how it cascades down. And what happens is we put these people in these roles and we think, yep, like to your point, they're competent as a collector, so they'll be okay. And then what happens is we're telling them what to do, not the how.
Mhm.
So we're not coaching from this layer down to the team leader. So we'll say things like, oh, go and have a meeting with your team and explain the new process. Now, the first thing we'll hear them say is they'll regurgitate. So what they'll say is, Adam told me that I have to tell you that this is what we've got to do. So straight away, they've lost credibility
Yep.
because I haven't
Fun
taken
game of
ownership.
telephone.
Yeah, straight away. So then it'll be things like the leader will say, oh, people are coming in late or dress code's getting a bit sloppy, you need to address that. So there's the what again, right? So
Mhm.
guess what team leaders do? They get on their computer and they say, policy reminder, and they'll send an email out to all the staff. Now, I learnt this lesson really early. I did that once. I sat with a team and I said, come on, guys, we know we've got to start at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, whatever it was. I need you here on time. And this one collector said to me, Jody, can I have a word? I said, sure. And afterwards, he said, that really annoys me what you did. And I said, why? He said, because 10 of us are turning up on time and one person isn't. Why are you telling the rest of us that? I went, wow. So I never did that again, right? So that hiding behind policy, hiding behind my boss. So because I don't know how to be accountable yet,
Mhm.
I've already lost credibility before I've even started.
It's interesting, right? When we talk about the perspective. And so from your perspective, you're trying not to single out one person to say you're late, but then you have to in that instance to talk down to all of the, all 10 people, because you're trying to provide an even and balanced environment, but it's not always what it takes to lead a team. And
No.
sometimes, and that's there's a lot of things that we could talk about in that area.
But the biggest issue is normally we promote that person from within that team, and the
Mhm.
people I'm managing were my friends that I was going out to and maybe even drinking at night with, or I see them on the weekends, and now you're asking me to manage them. Oh, that's the hardest jump for anyone, I think, in their career.
That's true. Those personal relationships almost carry a weight with them when you move to that next level. Almost better to interconnect between the teams. Now, I mean, some people would argue that it's going to provide some flow, right? Like when you bring these people together, you're able to provide some flow, and they're going to work better together because they've got a deeper experience together. But your point of view makes a lot of sense, and when you're just being so familiar with everybody, and it's those friendships that are difficult to manage when you now have to have a difficult discussion with that person, because
Yeah.
not all management discussions are easy. And
And I was going to say, Adam, there's one other point in that too, that so that's part one, that difficult conversation. But I think what we see is probably worse than that, is it's perception, right? So I
Mhm.
remember once I had a manager, his name was Nick, and he was going out with James every lunchtime because they were friends. And I said to Nick, what's happening with you and James? He said, no, no, I can keep work and I can keep personal separated. No issue. But the issue wasn't that. The issue was there were other staff members that had a problem with the team leader. And
Mhm.
I said to one of the staff members, go and let Nick know. And she said, no, because her and James are friends. Him and James are friends.
Mhm.
And so what happens is that's the perception that they're friends. So then that behaviour can't get addressed either.
That's an interesting one. And as we talk about these items, it feels like the the management of this is not so much a middle management problem as it is a development, leadership, training issue.
Well,
And after you and I did our preparation, for today's discussion, which normally is about a 30-minute call, I think we talked for like an hour and a half because I got really into all of the things that we were talking about. But it made me look internally too, and I invited my team, a lot of my middle managers, to come and participate and to watch today,
yeah.
because that's a really important factor. That's something that I've promoted a lot of my people from within, and I've always been very proud of my internal promotions and moving these people up through the chain. But then I started asking the question of, like, am I giving them the tools to manage their people, or am I just setting people up for failure because they were peers with these individuals previously, that even though that you might be a great at whatever your particular role
Mm.
is, being a manager and managing the administrative process that goes with that and all of the administrative responsibilities is not for everybody.
And Adam, that's probably the number one thing we pick up on. So we come in and do the training, and as part of the training, we say, unless you're coaching it, then you're only going to get about 20% out of that training.
Mhm.
So we go in and look at the team leaders. So we'll say, okay, we'll set up the coaching program and we start to work with them. And the first thing out of their mouth, you ready? I'm too busy. I'm too busy being busy. And so when we say, well, what are you doing? Because in my view, a team leader's job is to do two things: coach and motivate your team to get
Mhm.
results.
Yeah.
So when we say, what are you doing? They're doing two things. They're either answering questions all day long because you've taken someone that's actually was competent as a collector, they're now incompetent. The old Peter principle, right? They're at their level of
Yeah.
incompetence. So to feel where's their level of comfort, it's going to be answering technical questions. And they aren't skilled yet in asking guided questions to guide it back to the person. So they just answer it. And then the second thing they do, they're sitting at their desk all day answering emails and doing reports.
And that in within that lies the biggest problems in taking somebody who is a solid producer and really enjoying their work. I always try to address the question when I meet with my team, especially individually, is like, what's bringing you joy in the role today, and what's no longer bringing you joy in your role. And it's just not for everybody to move into other positions. And And sometimes it's just about giving those people the tools. What can I
Yeah.
do to help you balance that administrative side of your new responsibilities versus continuing to lead a team toward the end goal that we're looking for? And it's
And
not an easy
mm,
balance.
well, Adam, one of the things that we picked up, so when you're saying help someone balance their admin duties, guess what people are not trained in? Time management. And
Interesting.
so you actually sit with them and say, show me, we actually do training on Outlook and calendars. So show me your calendar, show me how you are blocking out your time. And they say, what do you mean? Well, how are you scheduling your week? Oh, I just do this and I do that. We say, but show me how you're actually structuring it up. So there's no time for themselves. Show me where your one-on-ones are. So we do sessions in how to color code
Hmm.
your Outlook calendar and how to block time. Because again, it's another skill that we just assume and don't train leaders on.
Another one that I've found on that same subject line is email filters.
Yes.
I live in email filters, right? Like
Yeah.
my inbox is my workflow, and whether or not that's right or wrong, it's my way. And I live and die by email filters, and I've got hundreds of filters, not just to move things into folders, but to bring certain things to my attention, to really try and manage it. And for someone who can receive 500 emails in a day that require actual engagement, like that's a challenge. And like
Yeah.
part of that we've done through trying to implement automation, and some of that we've done through just trying to teach people like what an email filter is and how it works. I also live and die by the calendar. Live and die by the calendar, and pretty much the whole company has access to my availability on that calendar because it's the only way to know whether or not I'm going to be available. Even my family goes into the calendar and right
Yeah.
and manages it, because that time is the only thing I can't produce more of.
And no one taught you that. Did you work that out yourself over time, right?
I
There's
had to
no
work it out myself because it was the only way for me to survive. And
correct.
as all the sharing tools and things became apparent, right? Like Google Drive and all these things, it became a big part of like how we manage like ourselves, both professionally and personally.
And I think that would be tip number one. Start with your team leaders and ask them that question. Show me your time management strategy. So it doesn't matter what it is, but as long as they've got a strategy or a system, that would be a really good starting point. When they say, like what do you mean? Okay, that's telling you something.
That calendar management, I think, is a mission critical item, because if you're not scheduling your one-on-ones with your team, if you're not scheduling, even just put blocking off time for deep work, right? Focus time for me to actually focus on the tasks that I'm responsible for. Like I want to see that on the calendar. Like that's a real value add to the discussion.
And something we did with some team leaders recently, Adam, in a workshop, I got them to write down what are the three things that they can do every day that add value to the business.
That's an
Like the
interesting one.
three
I like
things.
that a
Yeah.
lot.
And it
I-
actually really narrowed it. And we did that for the collectors as well. And in the end, for the collectors, I think we got to, we started with the collectors, and it
mhm.
was being on the phone and talking to people. And I think, or negotiating, I think there were two for the collectors. And then when we got to the team leaders, what are the three things that you should be doing every day? And every group came up with coaching their staff. But guess what? None of them were doing.
No, coaching is one of those things that's really easy to push to the side. It's real easy to just,
Yeah.
oh, I'll get to that tomorrow. It's
Yeah.
always the thing that I can do later.
And it doesn't have to be structured, right? Like
Yeah.
coaching, we talk about coaching on the fly. So I was doing some filming for a company this week, and I don't even work there, but I was listening to the collector. I was thinking, oh wow, she's over talking. Someone needs to sit and have a quick conversation with her and say, hey, I noticed in that call, what do you think your talk time ratio was in that call? Because I didn't hear any pauses to allow the customer to talk.
Mhm.
Now that would be a coaching on the fly 5-minute conversation.
Which it is also good, but even just taking the time to sit there and listen to those discussions. And I think a lot of us have pushed so much of that into the compliance bucket, and we assume that the robot overlord is listening and it's going to point out anything that's wrong. But this is where we get back from a collector standpoint to that balance of compliance and
Uh,
performance, and that they don't need to be mutually exclusive.
well, I had a good discussion about this with someone yesterday. They said, we have overcooked coaching. We came in with this model and it was this, these acronyms and these models, and it was a competency based thing. And he said it was so
Mm-hmm.
complicated that just didn't work. It had to be quite simple, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it was being run, to your point, Adam, by the compliance team, right? So what was happening was compliance overrides all the soft skills, all the people skills, and then everyone says they're snipers, the quality of snipers, and then it becomes about the breaches and the arguments. And I'm going to say no, that wasn't a breach because that's affecting my performance.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes the toing and froing and the arguing. People don't see the value in the feedback, and so it's we often recommend that people pull out the compliance part of the quality
Mm-hmm.
and then separate the people skills as a coaching opportunity. So not marking, we tend not to mark or score the people skills. We make that about the coaching opportunity, and then the compliance can be scored, and we find that that balance tends to work better.
I mean, yeah, I mean, especially from a formal management perspective, and being able to break down the, let's say, the performance metrics or the KPIs that are mission critical for your organization. Now, how do you start to help these middle managers understand what this balance really looks like and communicate it downstream? Because one of the things we said at the very beginning was the parrot. And okay, I tell you, no, you tell them. And I say these things having been guilty of them at different points in my career. And a couple of
Mm.
years ago, we set up a structure where I've got a leadership team, and I meet with that leadership team a couple of times a week, and they're managing their departments and pushing it down. But I realized I also had to be having direct discussions so that it's not a parroting situation and I'm talking through everybody. So we started doing bigger meetings. But how can I start to look at the communication between me and the end user on a more frequent basis? Because when you bring everybody together, it's not so much of a personal discussion. And I look at this similar to the difference between sales and marketing. When I'm selling to somebody, I'm selling to the middle manager, I'm talking to them. But marketing is being able to speak to everybody with the same language. And that was really what drove me to that for my master's degree. Just the whole idea. I loved being a salesman, but the idea of being able to communicate one on one for the rest of my life was daunting. I wanted to be able to communicate to the masses. How can I improve my discussions or my communications between myself and every level of the organization down
Mm.
each thread?
Yeah, and it's it's very personalised, isn't it? Because we look at all our different personality traits, and
Sure.
the way that say you were my boss, Adam, the way you and I interact and the way I communicate is very much determined by my personality traits. So I could probably take on some tougher feedback.
Hmm.
It's like when you're a football coach, right, or you're coaching a team.
Hmm.
You know that some people, if you give them direct feedback, they're going to fall apart.
Hmm.
Whereas that's what some people need, right? So it's, I think, number one, knowing the personalities of your staff and looking at their, we do disc profiles, but there's, tons of those types of things. But what are their motivators and what are their stresses? And I think that's important to know because then they're your levers in how you communicate with someone. But also the way that I would communicate a message is very different from perhaps a passive leader and the way that they're going to communicate it.
Hmm.
So it's no good me giving you an instruction on this is what you need to say. It would be, Adam, here's the message. Do you want to take me through how you're thinking you're going to deliver that?
So for my managers that are nervous about being able to have the difficult discussion with their former friends, right? As we kind of transition this a little bit, how can I empower them to be able to hear the tougher feedback, to give the tougher feedback, and to
Mm.
have those more difficult conversations? So if I've got a department that's underperforming and I need to talk to that department about it, my first person is the leadership, right? Is my leader on that team, and really to our whole leadership team, because I expect everybody cross trained and to be working cross departmentally, right? It's a
Yes.
team. We survive as a team or we die as a team, but we're a team.
Mm.
So that's kind of always been my philosophy. But how do I empower that middle manager to be more comfortable and confident in their downstream communications?
I'm going to say two things. So, first one is focus on the inputs, not the outputs. So, you
Mm.
raise, let's say the results are down. First thing they'll go out is they'll go to the output. Our targets are down. We've got to get more collections. We've got to get more of this in the door. We need more sales. Now that's the output, but what are the ingredients or the inputs to get there? That's the bit they're missing. So they'll go straight to that output. They'll put that pressure on the team. We've got to get the results up. Come on, guys. Where's the how and where's the ingredients? So I think that's the bit they're missing. What are the things we're not doing along the way to get to that outcome? So it's always focusing on inputs first. So, you know, is it, and a sports coaches like that, right? They're looking at, you know, what's your diet, what's your nutrition, what's your fitness, what's your training, you know, what's your headspace like, what's happening in your mindset to get, you know, to win the game. Whereas in corporate, we go straight to the end. So it's actually getting people to think through that and saying, well, what are we missing and what needs to happen to get there?
That's interesting. And how do we get to that point? Now, when we were preparing for this one, you had talked to me a little bit about your double tap strategy on the
Well,
floor
that,
when you're dealing
yes.
with collectors. So help me understand its application to these types of scenarios.
So, yes, the second part is people need the language to know how to have conversations. So I think it's pulling out from your staff what are their, this was a workshop we did recently, we had a whole group of team leaders and we got them to tell us, what are your hotspots? What are your biggest challenges that you're dealing with? So in this group, it kept coming up, oh, staff are on their phones. And I said, right, like I'm waiting for the rest of it. That was it. They're in a call centre. And I said, oh, I say, okay, I'll give you a strategy for that, guys. This is what you do. And I stood up and I went, you walk past their desk and you say, guys, off the phones, please. And so they are now calling that the Jody double tap strategy. And Adam, it was just pulling someone off saying, you need to be off your phones. Can you get back to work? Was so challenging for them.
Can you do the thing that you're here to do? But I think that goes back to when you promote from within, you're working within this friendly group, and you've got a group of people that have been together for years as, you know, as equals, and now as the levels start to shift, and you know there's turnover and there's all kinds of other ingredients into the imbalance that's created, or it's just a high performer who's being promoted, right? They worked really hard, they achieved, they now
Yes.
get this next opportunity, but I'm just not feeling like I'm preparing them to the best of my ability to be successful at that next opportunity.
Yeah. And I think then what leads into their well-being is they don't know where the boundaries are. So what happens is they think, well, I'm the leader. I think I'm here to fix everyone's problems. I think I've got to solve all the problems of the world. So someone will come to them and tell them a problem. They go, oh, I've got to fix this for them. And this happens on so many layers, Adam. Can I give you a really basic one that I hear all
Please.
the time?
I love the analogies that you provide, and I still go back to watching the video. It was one of the short videos you gave me right before RMAI about dress code, and just the way that you guys have addressed that in video has been really cool. So please enlighten
Oh,
me.
yeah, dress code. There's one.
The
Wouldn't
dress
know.
code one, I'll share a link to that in the replay here, because that was a really cool example for me of the application of short form video content for this new purpose. Every single person who's on here right now watching us, and everyone who's going to watch the replay, is watching most likely on a mobile device, and they're scrolling through all the time on Instagram, Facebook, and now they're scrolling on LinkedIn for this type of video content. So why aren't we we always talk about how we're going to communicate with the consumer where they're most comfortable, right? We're going to find them on text, email messaging. We're going to channel, you know, all these things. Well, why don't we do that internally? Why don't we create the video in the format that our internal people want to see, and communicate with them on platforms and channels that make them comfortable?
So true.
So, I'm sorry.
No,
Back
no,
to
no,
this,
no.
and
You're on a
I
roll.
digress. But you know, bringing it back, help me understand. Like, let's talk about that a little bit in terms of having those difficult conversations,
Oh,
and,
the
and
boundaries.
empowering that middle manager to then go have the difficult discussion.
Well, actually, we have a video on this one. So we've got a video where I'm the employee and I'm calling out all these problems and the leader's sitting in front of the video and they're solving them all for me. So the first one I call out is, I've got a headache. So what, what happened? Adam, I was training a group of team leaders, right? I had 16 of them. It was this, change management thing I was taking them through. And the group came in, and one of the girls sits down and she's going, just huffing and puffing, loudest person in the room.
Hmm.
And one of her friends said to her, "What's wrong?" And she says, "Oh, I've got a headache." And so the other girl says, "Oh, do you want an aspirin? Do you need a headache tablet?" Now, this woman was probably 45 years old. Do you think a 45-year-old doesn't know to go and get their own headache tablet if they've got a headache? And I say, what was she really saying? She was really saying, "I don't want to be here for the day, right?"
Hmm.
So my question to her was, "Hey, what do you need to do to get yourself right to be here today?" Different question, right?
It's a very different question than do you need this? And now let me
Yeah,
have
do
my
I
very
need
expensive
it?
person go get it for you.
Yeah, I'm not the aspirin hander outerer in this business, right? So what happens is we're enabling these things. Now, if she had a headache, different, right? But it wasn't. I could tell it was a different issue. So we go, "Oh, I'll go and get that for you." And then we hear this all the time. So you're a new team leader and you're told to go and have an attendance conversation because the person's late. So I say, "Adam, you're late. What's going on?" And you say, "Oh, the bus was late." And I say, "Oh, have you looked at a bus timetable? Have you thought about getting an earlier bus?" That is classic, right? Now, why are you telling an adult to catch an earlier bus? Or this one, you're late, and I say, "Adam, have you thought about setting an alarm clock?" What I do, I use two. I use one on my phone, and I'm going into alarm clock conversations with my staff, and they're adults in the workplace.
Yeah, look, it's so silly to hear it, but I can also hear these conversations happening in different offices that I've worked in through my career.
Yes. So what we do, we actually have a toolkit of accountability questions to ask a staff member. So we teach the boundaries. So that question I asked was very much about, what do you need to do?
Hmm.
So it'll be, "Adam, what do you need to do to get yourself here on time?" Because this is not a me problem. This is definitely a you problem. And what then happens is, so HR or whoever that isn't on the front line writes
Hmm.
these things for people. So, well-being in the workplace, really important, right? So when someone tells you they've got a mental health issue or a something happening for them, a
Hmm.
vulnerability, the first thing out of a leader's mouth is, "Oh, and how can we support you?" So I had a group of leaders last week. I said, "Wrong question." Because now if I say to you, "Adam, how can I support you?" I've opened that up that big, right?
Hmm.
Because what does that mean? And I'm not your counselor and I'm not your support mechanism, right? I'm here at work within my scope of my role to support you. So I said to the leaders, here's just a little tweak on the question. I would be saying, "Adam, what support do you have outside of work?"
Hmm.
And then the second question after that would be, "And Adam, what can we do to support you within work?" And I would really separate those two words, outside of work and within work. Because the minute you open that up, I've had leaders driving their staff to work. We had one leader, he said, "My staff member was done for driving under the influence, so he lost his license. So I was driving him to work." Then on the way home, he's saying, "Oh, can you stop at McDonald's? And, I just want to get a this and a that." And he said, "Next thing I'm buying him coffees and buying him cheeseburgers." And so once you overstep the boundary, you open it
Slippery
up.
slope. Yeah. Well, that really does open up a lot of opportunities. It also makes you the therapist all of a sudden, and now you're finding yourself in a position where you're having a lot of your time that's now being pulled out from all of your other team members that you need to be managing and supporting, and you're getting overly focused on one person who has so many problems that they're probably not performing.
Yeah, and Adam, the other one I was just thinking that I hear team leaders do. So we've got to get our results and we've got to get our end of month performance up and results are down. So I say, "Oh, Adam, you're down. Do you want me to get on the phones and I'll make some calls for you. I'll jump on your portfolio and see if I can get the results in." So again, they're doing everything for their staff.
You can't do the work for them. You just
No,
can't.
and I think it's if we don't give them some strategies and language for how to have those conversations, just those little tweaks I gave you on language today, Um, People say, "Oh, that's fantastic! I can use that," and we give it to them in a little thing they can laminate, and off they go. But if we're not giving them that language, how do they know how to have these conversations?
They don't. So I mean, some of this actually none of this did I learn in business school, like at all, right? Like
No.
I got an MBA, didn't learn any of that. And look, and we talked a lot about management structures and hierarchies and tall and flat and
Mm,
all of those things, but the actual practicality of having some of these discussions only comes from the actual experience. And if you're a new manager, there's no way to gain that experience. There's not a YouTube video you can go watch, right? Like it does take some level of experience, but giving and arming them with the tools that they need to build the house makes a lot of sense, right? Giving them and feeding it to them in a format in which they can digest it, understand it. I can't just give someone policies and procedures and expect them to know how to do their job. I have to
yeah,
find ways to communicate to every level of my organization the information that they need, but not through just giving them long documents to read. I'm a policy nut. I like to write one for everything so that everybody knows what their job is and it's something to refer to, but it's meant to be something to refer to. I still have to find ways to train them and teach them these tools. And there's no
yeah.
policy for this.
I think when we get hired by the execs to come into the business, and they'll say, "Can you go and we want coaching?" I go, "Okay."
Mhm.
So we'll start with you. Oh, nah, start with the team leaders. So they actually don't see their role from the top down as coaching, right? They see it just starts at team leader level. And so when we say, look, what are the team leaders doing? Nobody knows because no one is sitting observing them. So a company recently said to me, "Oh, what we're going to get the team leaders to do," because we pick up your point that they're really busy being busy. So we're going to get them to write down what they're doing and write down, all day what they're doing and how they're spending their time. And I said, "Why aren't you sitting with them and watching what they're doing?" So they don't want to take up the time because you only need to sit with a team leader for a day. You just sit there and just watch them, just here observing, just, to help to see where we're spending our time. And you'll see them up and down, up and down. They're answering questions. And someone will say, "Oh, I've got to fill this in for HR." And they'll say, "Oh, give it to me. I'll do it for you." And you just watch. And they're just doing everything for everyone. "Oh, I'll fill that in for you. Oh, let me email that. Oh, hang on. We've got a meeting coming up. I'll send the calendar invite out." And so I'll say to them, "Why did you send that out? You've got 20 staff and an admin person. Why aren't they sending the calendar invites out?" Oh,
Because they saw somewhere that you're supposed to lead in the group. And that's, your
that's
role is to pick up everything, but it's really not. And I think that's a misconception as you look out into social media and some of the training that managers receive. They're like, "Oh, no, you're responsible for the results. You're responsible for all the things." And I think some people just try and take that too far and they try and do all of the things. It took a long time before I learned to let go. You're right. I'm 1,000,000% guilty of all of the things that we're talking about. Although I
yeah,
was never really the mother hen. I never really took that mother hen role of kind of managing or taking on everything for everybody else. I kind of just anything that required my thought process always kind of kept it to my desk and tried to manage it. But that comes over time. Now I have seen others in across organizations, consulting and even internally, that have that mother hen kind of persona,
yeah.
right? They're the office mom, and when they're the office mom, they take on this other role and responsibility that how do you manage that? Right? How do you break that cycle? Because it's definitely like implanted in their mind. So like how do you start to break that cycle?
Again, I think it's got to be observation because you're watching the mother hen chooking around trying to fix everything. And what I do, Adam, look, do it the way I do it. What I do, Adam, here, I'll do that for you. I had a lady yesterday say, "Jodie, you haven't eaten all day." I went and got some pizza because I have, and she was mother henning me. Well, it was lovely, right? She was worrying about me not having eaten and she got me a pizza, which was lovely. But imagine if you were doing that for your staff all day, right? "Oh, you haven't eaten, and Adam, you've been hydrated. I've noticed you haven't been having a drink," and it's down to this. So it's, I think, from the leader observation. In that moment, what's happening is that team leader is not developing the staff. They're not
Mhm.
teaching them. They're not bringing them up. They're not making them accountable. They're not empowering them to make any decisions. And it's a form of micromanagement, but they don't see it that way because they think they're being so helpful and lovely.
Yeah, it it's hard to not appreciate the people that are trying to do nice things for you, but
Yes.
right? You look at the cost of the time of all of the people around you as a business owner, and you go, oh, okay, so now the woman getting pizzas is in the top tier of my expenditures. And it
Mhm.
really it becomes a little bit more difficult when you start looking at it from that perspective. So, one of the other things that we had talked a little bit about was kind of emotional dumping, right? And being that person that either you can dump to or you're dumping on other people. And you had a really good analogy for that one that had me rolling on the floor laughing after the call. Could you talk to us a little bit about this entire concept of just dropping everything on people simultaneously? Like, what do you, how do you manage that
Well,
process? Like, what do you do?
do you know what? This, of all the training I do, Adam, and we do some really complex training. We train sensitive conversations and vulnerability, and we do suicide awareness. We do lots of training, right? Of all the training I do, this one sticks the most, and it's called potatoes. And for anyone watching, I have a video of us, a YouTube I can send. I don't know why potato sticks, but here's the
It
concept. There's
sticks.
two types of potatoes, Adam. So I'm going to talk about the big bag of potatoes first. So I've been on a phone call. Actually, it's like this now, isn't it? It's not this, but um,
It's just attached to
I'm
my
on my
head
phone
now.
call.
Yeah.
I'm old school. Um, I hang up the phone. I walk up to Adam. Adam's my workmate, and I go, "Oh, Adam, you should have heard that woman on the phone. You know, she says that her mum died. I think that's not true because it's three times in the notes, and then she abuses me, and then you should have heard what she said to me. I'm not paid enough for this, Adam, and." And so I say to people, what have I just done with my big bag of potatoes? And everyone goes, well, you dumped them on Adam. And I go, thanks, Adam. Now, did you ask for my potatoes? No,
No,
did you want my potatoes?
not
so,
particularly. No.
so people say, excuse me, but we need to vent. And I'll say, all right, how many times a day are you venting? Because I think if it's more than once, it's flat out complaining. It's just whinging in the workplace, right?
You're
And
not
people say,
wrong.
oh, that's not right. I said, well, let's think about it. Now, there's a difference, right? If I have some real concerns and I've got an issue, let's say I was thrown off by that customer, listen to the difference if I say, Adam, I just came off a really bad call. Do you have 5 minutes for a debrief? So we actually teach people to use that language because what I've done, I'm asking your permission, right? And I'm letting you know that I'm going to unload my potatoes. So it kind of, when we start to train this, I'll say to people, that's the type 1 potato. Can I give you type 2 potato, which is worse? Type 2, 2 potato. Let's say it's Monday morning and we come into our meeting and I come in and I say, hi guys, I didn't sleep last night. So I kick, I kick off the first potato, right?
Yeah.
And then you go, Adam, I didn't either. And I go, my husband snores. And then someone goes, coffee's so expensive now. And then someone goes, oh my God, the traffic, it's just so busy trying to get into the office. Working from home so much easier. And then I sit down and I go, oh, this computer system sucks. Who wrote the IT sucks. Nothing in this place works. What happens is we are now bonding in potato throwing. We're bonding in negativity. And
It's
so if
exactly
you
what
think
it
like
is.
that, I think, oh, well, I may as well throw a potato. I don't want to leave Adam out there with his potato. I'll throw a potato. Next thing, there's potatoes going all around the room. And my brain is like overloaded with negativity. And actually, there's a really good YouTube called The Science of Complaining, and I'll play that.
Okay.
And it's about if you sit near someone who complains, it changes the chemical structure of your brain. So when you say that person's doing my head in, they really are.
That's a really true statement. And I mean, the casualness of negativity, I think, is just indicative of toxic environments when everything is negative and every day is negative and everything is negative. Like, I can't work with I can't have people like that on my team because it's just going to make me negative, and then I don't want to be here. And I've been guilty of it. I've worked with people that made me not want to work at my own company, and it required transition. Like, I'm serious. Like, oh, look, sometimes you find yourself in a situation like that because you're kind of locked into it in order to produce the product that you've already sold, and you
Yeah.
have to continue to march on, and but also have to start looking for that light at the end of the tunnel and ending that and moving on to a much more positive environment. Like the team I have now, I wake up and I jump on the phone and I'm all excited. Here we go. Like, let's have it. What are we going to accomplish today? And I feel like that's the attitude of the people that we've developed around us. I've got a unique environment in one of my offshore facilities where I went there last year and I do one-on-ones with everybody. And originally they were supposed to be like 15 or 20 minutes. And I think they turned into like an hour and a half a piece. Like the entire trip across the world ended up in these one-on-one meetings. And it was valuable from a sense, but it became very clear that I had one cancer in the group that was a problem. And when
Yeah.
everybody but that person complained about that person, I knew that there was something here that needed to be addressed. The interesting thing is that in that environment, they were not actually complaining about the person. Like they weren't complaining about the problem, they were complaining about the way that the problem treated another person. And that was their concern, the treatment of this other third party person by that individual. And that was where the issue stemmed from. I thought it was really interesting in how close knit a group has to be to identify that, to where they weren't saying, I'm impacted by this. They were saying, I'm not comfortable with that impact, the impact it's having on that person. And so in the end, we decided to remove the problem from the situation because and when we started thinking about it, I was with, my wife and one of my friends as we were traveling around that country, and we were having some conversations about it, and it kept coming back to like, I don't want to be survivor about it, but like somebody got voted off the island. If you can't communicate and you can't participate with the other people in the room and you can't be part of the positive culture that we're trying to build, then it's just not a fit. I think it's Gary Vee that says hire fast and fire faster.
And Adam, I think that's the other thing. We're so scared of getting rid of people now. It's like, how did
Yeah,
that
that I didn't
happen?
even want to work there anymore, and I own the
Like,
company.
I think we have to, so I think we see it as a reflection. Oh, if I've got a staff member that's no good or they're not happy, that's a reflection of me. Well, no, we look at, so when someone is doubting themselves as a leader, I always say, look, there's three things to check off. Have you given the person the tools to do the job? So you've trained them, they know how to do the job. Have you given them a good environment, like they can ask questions, they can do all of those things, and have they had the training? If you can tick those things off, then that's again, it's back to, and you've done everything to support that role. Again, they might not be the right person for the job, and it's giving leaders confidence to have those conversations too.
And that's really the objective here was to try and help to maintain the environment we had worked so hard to build. And so as part of that, one of those things that I try and do in those one-on-ones is empowering my team members to tell me when I'm wrong, to tell me what they think, and to try and manage me on some level. I don't feel like I need a lot of management, but if I'm not willing to open my mind to the idea, then I'm not going to be successful. So how do I how do I better empower those individuals to have that conversation with me, or the people at, the line level to have that conversation with middle management? Like, how do I empower managing up in an organization?
Yeah, we we actually have a managing up toolkit that we developed. Believe it
Of
or
course.
not, Adam. Actually,
Of course you do. Why am I not surprised?
I've got it here. My managing up toolkit because I had it ready for you. I was hoping you would ask that today. Because
It's a real problem. It's a real,
it
like,
is.
that. I feel like I'm in a therapy session now, though.
Yeah,
I feel
yeah,
like
yeah.
I've hired a consultant. Like, this is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm a wannabe psychologist, Adam. I'm not, but I'm a wannabe. Um, so one of the challenges and what I think causes us, the one thing that can keep us awake at night is our boss.
Mm-hmm.
So you, as a leader, you can actually be the last thing someone's thinking about before they go to sleep at night. That's how much stress you can actually cause somebody, and you mightn't even know it. And so it can be the staff member has this issue that they don't know how to raise. So one of the things we teach this as a concept in collections, but we also just teach it in any feedback, is trying to remove pointy language. So trying to remove the you and talk about the scenario and the situation. Because the minute I say, Adam, you do this and you do that, it's human nature, even though you're the boss and you're my manager, you're going to react. That part of your fight and flight and your brain's probably going to react. And you're going to go, yeah, well, come on, Jodie, you've got a few problems going on too. So that part of the brain starts to react. So when I neutralize it and say, Adam, I was wondering if I could have a few minutes. So we talk about first, do the ego pat. So I'm going to say, Adam, I always, really value your insights, and I was wondering if I could have a few minutes of your time. I wanted to talk about something that wasn't sitting comfortably with me last week. And I've made that about me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not coming in on the attack. I haven't said you in there anywhere. I haven't said you were rude to me and you called me out in front of other people and you humiliated me. Even though that's what I'm thinking, I actually need to pre-plan my language to make it either about me and keep it fairly neutral. And I might even say there was a comment made in the meeting about my performance, and I'd hope that maybe we could have had that perhaps after the meeting. What are your thoughts on that, Adam? So in that, I haven't blamed you, I haven't said you, I've made it about me and how I felt without making myself sound pathetic. Because staff don't want to sound, because they go, I'm going to sound pathetic if I say it that way. And so we spend a lot of time mapping that conversation out with staff to go, okay, and they prep it. And then we actually say, what do you think Adam's going to say? And they go, oh, he's probably going to say, well, I did this. I go, okay, well, what question can you ask off the back of that? So to have a conversation like that, you can't go in cold. We find it needs a lot of preparation.
I agree with that statement. I mean, and I think that's what keeps people up at night is the permutations of possibilities from a statement like that. So when we start a conversation like that, that you get caught in your mind of what are the permeations and my response to their counter response, and now you're playing chess in your head. You're playing the whole game
Yes.
of chess in your mind as you're
Yeah.
trying to prepare for this discussion, and having some tools that allow you to have that. Some tools that allow you to better understand that I think are important. And I think this also, ties back a little bit to thinking about what really motivates people and how different people need to be managed when your vision is from the top of an organization. And this is, I think, where business school did come in handy, not in these interpersonal situations, but in an understanding of the management of groups of people. And so one of the things that I would point out to that would be the two theories that I look at the absolute most when it comes to anything related to managing people. And this is an oversimplification on so many levels of the two most important things that I walked out of my education with. The first one is Douglas McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y. Now, Douglas McGregor was an American business consultant who went to Japan after World War II to help rebuild the country and rebuild their industries. And part of what he did was studying the behaviors of individuals. And I've seen this cross culture. This is global as far as I'm concerned. There's two types of people in this world. There's an X and there's a Y. Ys work hard for their self-satisfaction, for their own desire for positive inflection on themselves, self-actualization on some level, and X's work hard enough not to get fired. And I'm not saying that there's not a place for both styles of people in an organization, because the world needs ditch diggers too, right? Not a great comment, but it's very true. There's a need for people at every level of an organization. And sometimes you identify somebody in your company that's going to work 9 to 5 and go home, and they're not interested in the next level, and they're not interested in getting promoted, and they're really not motivated by money. They're just there to earn their paycheck and go home. And I can respect that, but I don't make those people leaders. Then you have the Ys. And I've got some Ys in my organization, and it's taken a long time to develop a team of Ys, significantly longer than when I had a mix of X and Ys. Those Ys work hard for their own self-satisfaction. They're not driven by me yelling. They're not driven by me pushing. They're driven by me asking questions. And the best question that I can ask a Y when they tell me, is this good enough? Is this project good enough? Do you think it is? Because you are a driving factor. If you believe that you've done the best that you can do with this particular project, I'm all for it. I believe in you. And for those whys that believe in themselves, what a great position to be in. And that really is a powerful tool for me as a leader to put that back to them. It also is one of those ways in which I try to grow a leader, like we're talking about here, to have impact on the team that they manage,
Mm,
because I'm empowering them by giving them the opportunity to make some of those decisions. If something is totally off the rails, then I'll come back in and do it. But I do my absolute best to not reverse one of those managers' decisions, and hope that I can train them and teach them and show them how I would respond to those things so that they can start to learn and manage those things themselves, because that's how you multiply yourself. I can
yeah.
never just train my way into that or hire my way into multiplying myself. I have to empower them to do those things and to not feel like every time they make a decision, someone's going to overturn it. And I had that
Mm,
happen to me in my past as a manager. It was absolutely just one of those things that I could not stand. Now, understanding the motivations between an X and a Y comes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this is something that we can look at outside of business and just try to understand, right? Like the first thing is like our physical being, a layer of safety, and like, do we feel safe as a physical being here? Like, am I protected where I'm at? Am I under threat? Once I'm not under threat, then I can focus on being social with you, and I can start having interactions with other people because I now know that I exist. I'm safe, right? And then social. Then I can start to feel better about myself, because once I've had social interactions, I can start to understand who I am on a different level, and then eventually reaching self actualization. If you've never read through, and I'll give this to our audience, if you've never read through Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I highly, highly suggest it, and go read a couple of articles on X and Y, because I guarantee you, I will argue it with anybody that wants to sit down and have this argument. I don't have a third type of person. There's an X and a Y. There is no Z. There's no A. I got X and I got Y, and I'm willing to. I wrote a dissertation on it. I'm willing to have that particular
okay.
discussion with anybody, anywhere in the world, because I've only really seen those two different layers. Either
Mm,
you're working hard for just like I'm here for my paycheck, or you
mm,
really are trying to feel your own success. I know that's a lot of comments, but it
mm.
feels like that's a good way to kind of round out what we're talking about here today, about being managing up and just trying to understand those motivations. And when we let off this conversation today, one of the things you were talking about is know the people. If you want to be able to talk just past the leadership team and you want to be able to speak to the entire organization, know them. The only way you can know them is spend time with them. And the larger your organization gets, the more difficult it becomes to do 15-minute meetings. And the more tired you get, or the worse you feel for the people at the end, because you know that they're getting the worst of you every time that they have an interaction with you. And so I've started, shuffling that and trying different ways in shorter bursts over longer periods of time. And, I'm still trying to find my way as a leader as it comes to those things as well. So my question with all of those statements is, any advice you can give me on how I can do better at achieving this, one, the understanding, and two, the impact of the communications that I'm having both up and down my organization?
Is that a question to me or is that a
Yeah, that's a
rhetorical
question to you.
question?
I would
Oh.
look at it's I'm really, I feel like you've been my therapist through this whole thing. So
Well,
I'm just kind of looking for like, what else can I be doing?
do you
Like,
know what
this
I'm
is my
hearing?
mind frame.
Do you know what I'm hearing? You're trying and you're putting in effort and you're constantly on and you're assessing. I think that's all it's about, right? None of us get it right. God, imagine standing here going, yeah, I'm a fantastic leader. Who is going to stand up there and say that? No one. Because we're always critical of ourselves, right? I train this stuff and then I go back and go, oh, I better make sure I'm doing all of those things, right?
That's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah. And the reason, do you know that one I gave you, something's not sitting comfortably with me? The reason
Hmm.
I wrote that into the cool toolkit, someone used that with me
Hmm.
because I had said something and I kind of knew I probably shouldn't have said it. And then they came back with that and I thought, oh, well done. In the moment, I was going, well worded, well worded. I was thinking as they were approaching me. So, Adam, we evolve, we're learning, we don't get it right. And I think that's the thing as a leader, right? Don't be hard on yourself as long as you're giving it your best go. And I think you're being yourself. I think that's the main thing, is that you're not trying to be someone you're not.
No, definitely not trying to be anybody. It's hard enough being me. How could I pretend to be somebody
Exactly.
else? It's already a big enough challenge as
That's
it
effort.
is. Jody, this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. I'm going to encourage our audience to ask questions. We'll be there'll be a replay on LinkedIn, they'll be on YouTube, and then you're going to be at the ACA conference
Yes.
in just a couple of months.
Yeah. Excited.
Me too. I'm very much looking forward to continuing this conversation because it sounds like I need my therapist here to come in and talk
I
with
know
my
my
team.
boundaries. I'm not a therapist, Adam.
My business consulting friend that helps. Whatever title works is fine by me. This has been an impactful discussion for me, so I really do appreciate you taking the time and energy and effort to continue creating great content with me. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks.
For those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions, you can leave those in the comments on the live, and Jody will be getting those as they come in, and we'll be responding just as quickly as we can on LinkedIn and YouTube. Or if you have additional questions, I think you all know how to find me at this point. You can shoot them over, and I'll make sure that Jody has an opportunity to do those as well. I'll also be adding to the comments below here some links to some videos that Jody's going to send over that we talked about today. Specifically, we talked about the the dress code, and we had some other interesting ones in there as well. So we'll get those included as well. But thank you everybody for your time and attention today. We really do appreciate you joining us on LinkedIn Live, and we'll see you all again soon. Bye, everybody.